Hey, welcome back. First of all, I want to apologize for the heater. I hope that's not too loud or annoying, but it is cold down here in Texas right now, so I need that to keep functioning out here. I do not have central air heating in this shop. But today we are going to do some repair videos. I got quite a few I'm going to make on the same car. It is a 2010 Toyota Avalon. So if you're here to learn how to do a repair, you're welcome. We're about to get into it. What we're doing on this video is changing the passenger CV axle. This is something pretty much anybody can do at home in their driveway. It's not too terrible of a job. Save yourself some money. It is not too cheap to get these done. And that being said, I will put a link up here in the video and in the description for a replacement axle on Amazon. If you got time, you want to order that in, that helps us out. They give us kickbacks on those. And it's also the cheapest place you're going to find parts. But that being said, we're going to dive right into it. I want to point out I'm doing a bunch of videos at once because this thing's getting a good deal of work. So you do not have to take off the rotor and brake assembly. I'm just doing brakes also right now. But you're going to start by getting the car in the air. If you're in the driveway, get it jacked up, do one side at a time, get it supported on a jack stand. If you have a lift like me, get it up in the air, get the tires off. Once the tires are off, leave your rotor and your caliper on. It won't look the same as mine, but everything else is the same, except this is going to be attached, right? So what we're looking for is, you see here, look at that passenger boy. It is tore up, slinging grease all over the place. This is something you don't like to see with an axle. So even if it's not clicking and making noises, it's going to very, very soon. So you just go ahead and replace it. You can reboot them. There are places that will do that. You can do it yourself if you're feeling real frisky, but typically at this point in time, you get to clean it very, very, very well. Get all the dirt out, re-grease the whole thing, pack it, put a boot on. Most people just replace them. It's a lot easier and they're not too expensive. So that's what we're gonna do, just get a fresh unit in. But yeah, that being said, you're gonna start off, once you have your tire off, you have this axle nut. This is the first hurdle you're gonna have to get over. So I am going to go grab the socket and zip this off with my impact. If you do not have an impact, you're gonna need a second person. Make sure the other tire is on the ground and you're doing one side at a time. And then have it in park and have them hold the brakes just to help with that, so you're not putting too much stress on it, and then you can break it loose with a long handle ratchet. But I'm gonna grab my impact and zip this nut off, and then we'll pick up from there. All right, two things I forgot to mention. One, the nut is a 30mm 12 point. So you need a 30mm 12-point socket. That's not super common in your standard toolkit, so I'll also have a link for that in the description as well, if you need one. Another thing is I get a handful of complaints in my videos about how shaky they are from me holding the camera. I'm not very steady. I'm trying to find the best way of doing this without just shaking you all over the place, you know. But I also need to get to the fastener so you can see what I'm doing. A lot of people think I should have a tripod, but the tripod's gonna be way back there. I can't get it up where I need it. So let me know in the comments if this is too shaky for you or if I'm doing better. But yeah, here we go. So we got the nut off. And now you're going to push this puppy straight through the backside, make sure it's free. So you see how it's moving nice and easy like that? There we go. So we know we're free there. The next step is going to be to shoot out these two 22mm bolts. I got one here, one here. They have nuts on the backside holding the strut. So you got a nut here and a nut here. So we're going to hold this with a wrench and shoot out this bolt and take both of these out. Once that comes out, this whole knuckle will be able to fold forward and we can pop the CV axle out the backside. So let me get those out and then we'll take a gander at it from there. So the next step here is we're gonna pull the wheel speed sensor out so that way we don't get ourselves in trouble and put too much tension on that wire. So I'm gonna show you where that's at real quick. Here you go, we got this little wheel speed sensor coming down, going into the hub. I'll circle the bolt on the screen, but we're gonna zip that out and then slide that wheel speed sensor out of the hub. And then we will pull this little retaining clip off right here. Set the wire to the side so that way we don't put too much tension on it whenever we pull the axle out. All right, so now with the ABS sensor set off to the side, we got our two bolts off here. We are good to work this puppy forward and push this axle out. So I'm actually gonna set y'all over here to the side and then maybe you can see how I work it out of there.
Six and a half hours later.
Sometimes you get enough movement by just disconnecting the strut tower to get the axles out. This one, you'll see here, is still that far protruded through the hub. So what we're actually gonna have to do is we're gonna have to drop the tie rod in as well, which I need to do anyway because these boots are back here. So I'm gonna try and do like a combo video here, but yeah, if you're doing the axle, we gotta disconnect that tie rod in as well. And once we get that thing knocked out, this thing will fold over plenty enough to get that axle out on this side. All right, here we go. So I kind of just stabbed my spindle back up in there just to make it a little more presentable and a little easier to work on. We are going to move down here to this outer tie rod. So you will see there is a castle nut right here with a cotter pin through it. We're gonna pull this cotter pin out, snip the end and get it pulled out. And then we're gonna zip this castle nut off. And so I'm gonna go ahead and actually knock that out off screen. And then try and get my lighting all right here. And then we will pick up from there. So I got the nut off. The nut is a 17 millimeter, by the way. So now I'm gonna show you a little trick I was taught. So if you need to pull the tie rod end out without damaging the boot and destroying it, you can put the castle nut on backwards, screw it in until it is flush with the bottom of the threads. So you just feel it with your thumb, lay it down there and look, it doesn't really matter. It's got some grimies on it, but we'll be all right. So right now, here we go, we are flush with the threads. Once you have it there, you can actually hit up on this with like 3-pound sledge or just a regular old hammer, and it would pop it out of the taper at the top, and then you just unscrew it and you're good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Now that one's grimy enough, I'm just gonna pull it off with the impact. There you go, see that, popped it right on up, and she's ready to come out of the spindle now. But typically, if you're struggling to get the axle out, you take the tie rod out, you'll get enough play to get the axle removed from the spindle. In this case, I'm still struggling. So what we're gonna do is I got a 17 millimeter here. We're going to pull the final piece holding the spindle up here, which is this lower ball joint. It actually bolts onto the control arm. So we're gonna pull all 3 of these 17s, and then we'll just pull the entire spindle out and put it on the ground. So that's the new plan. Get out, there we go. Voila, spindle removed. Not too bad. Now that was a little more difficult than your normal vehicle, but still really not that bad. So what we're looking at here is 2 bolts that go through your strut, your tie rod in, removed. You don't have to take it off like I did. That was for a future video because I'm doing that boot. And the 3 17s that hold your lower ball joint to the lower control arm. Now here we go. Our axle is free there. So I'm gonna raise it up in the air. And on the passenger side, unlike the driver's side, there's a mount up under here we gotta go release. My phone is ringing too. So let me get it up a little higher and then we'll take a look at that. It is the next day, got the heater fired up. So sorry if it's still loud, but it is still cold in here. We're gonna pick up where we left off. So we got the tie rod boot we need to put on. We got the axle we need to remove. So we're gonna start with getting this passenger CV axle the rest of the way out of the vehicle. So the next step, once we have it free on this end, is we need to come down here. And this little clamp, I think we squeeze it with pliers and pull it out from this guard right here to remove it. So I'm gonna grab pliers. I've never done one like this before, so let me figure it out and then I'll report back. But essentially we get this clip out and then we take this bolt out on the bottom, and then this axle should slide out freely. All right, so the clip went exactly like I had expected. I just got some channel locks in here, squeezed it, and it pulled right back and is now free. And the bolt is a 14 millimeter, so I zipped that out. So I think in theory it should slide out now. Oh God, tie rod, but it's not wanting to move. So let me grab a pry bar. We're gonna put a pry bar right here, and we're gonna try and pop this puppy back and see if we can't get it to release. All right, things escalated quickly in the last 20 minutes here. So how do we get it out? Finally got it free enough that I can slide it out. You'll notice mine broke in half at the CV joint. So the other half is laying over there already. That is because I tried prying it with a pry bar, the way you do like a circlip axle style. Couldn't get it to budge. Then I grabbed my slide hammer, which is something that most people don't even have. Started banging it with that slide hammer, and that's whenever the CV joint broke in half. So what I ultimately did, and this is something that pretty much anybody can do, it's gonna be miserable on your back, but it can be done, is if you come up on the bottom side here, this bearing seems to be where it's getting stuck. So I put this big pry bar up on the back side of the CV joint that's still there and just beat it with a 3-pound hammer until it slid out of there. Now it's out. So, woo! And we are going to clean up that bearing race and try and make sure that this new one slides in like butter. So let me get this out and then we'll look at what we got and we'll get it cleaned up and then install the new one. So I took a paper towel and wiped up all the slung grease on the side here. Got it at least thinned down. Now we're gonna go in here with our old friend, red Scotch-Brite. We're just gonna clean this surface up with the red Scotch-Brite. So we're just gonna lightly go around the entire thing, which I'm gonna probably need 2 hands to do. So maybe I can film this like this, but maybe, so we'll just go through and lightly brush around the whole thing, knock off any surface rust that's in here, and then douse it out with brake cleaner. And then I'm gonna clean this up with some brake cleaner down here as well. And we'll be ready to install the new axle. All right, after a little Scotch-Brite and brake cleaner cleanup, it went in like butter. So I got it all buttoned up now. It slid all the way in, bottomed out absolutely perfectly. So then I shot the bolt on the bottom side to make sure that I didn't move. The clip, you'll see I'm holding 2 things here. That is kind of the biggest booger of all. If you've dealt with these kinds of clips before, then you shouldn't have too much of a problem, but if you're new to it. So I put needle nose pliers in this direction and squeezed it to install. And then you're gonna use a flathead screwdriver once you get a hold of it with one hand and use this to push on the upper side and then the lower side and just kind of get it into its groove, and then you go from the bottom under here to push it in back here, and you'll feel it click into its location as you slowly kind of release it. You just kind of got to play with it till you get to click in. Just make sure, let me get under here real quick. Whenever it's done, make sure it's sitting in its groove on all the way around. Otherwise it will come out and it will be broken. So it's a very obvious channel it rides in. But there you have it. From this point, you just basically rinse and repeat from how we took it apart to put it back together. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that off camera. I don't think there's any need or anything fancy. Oh, there is a axle nut torque you're gonna need to know. So I will put that on the screen right now. But otherwise, just don't forget the cotter pin on your outer tie rod end. And yeah, hope this video helps you out. Hit that thumbs up button and like it, comment if you have any questions, or if I did something poorly, like shake the camera too much. Apologize if that's the case, or the heater was too obnoxious, but thanks for watching.